And so that book gives a really clear and honest view, just like you've portrayed there, in terms of, what it's like living with a disability. One of those ones that, I think we all see all too commonly is how society kind of sees disabled individuals as like exhibits. And we stand and people stand and they stare. And sadly, this is something that's accompanied you throughout a lot of your life. You talk in the book a bit how you overcome a lot of these barriers and challenges. What can you talk to that concept a little bit more?
Well, I think it comes down to parenting, and it comes down to education. We need to start educating our kids. So, you know, have these conversations with your kids at home. Get a Barbie doll that's in a wheelchair. Get a book on autism. Watch a TV show with a presenter who has a limb difference, and talk openly and honestly with your kids when they go, why are they in a wheelchair? Why do they look different? So I think parents, if you want to be a responsible parent, then the onus should lie with you. I think it's not fair to expect disabled people to be constantly having to educate others. I am an educator. I get paid to educate people. I'm happy to educate people, but I don't expect every disabled person to do that simply because they're disabled. And I think, for me, I struggled like many people as a teenager when people would stare or glare or point at me just because I was in a wheelchair. And my sister, she made a point to me one day, because I really like fashion. You might not be able to tell today, but normally I really, I embrace fashion. It's a big part of my identity, and it was growing up. I've got just a knack for putting things together and so forth. And my sister said to me one day, when I felt like people were really staring at me and I broke down in tears, and she said, maybe they're looking at you because they like your lipstick, or they like your handbag, or the fact that your outfit is so well put together. And I never really thought on those lines. Now, at the end of the day, probably 4 out of 5 people staring will do it because it comes from a place of ignorance, and I do not condone that. But you never know what other people are thinking. And when I've talked to other disabled friends of mine and shared this experience with them, they've said, oh my gosh, you're right. I was on a train the other day and someone was staring and I felt uncomfortable and I didn't know what to do. But when they got off the train, someone said, oh, can I just ask you where you got your trainers from? So let's not always go to a negative when we feel threatened or intimidated. We all need to learn our own coping mechanisms, because unfortunately, we're not going to change ignorance overnight. We're not going to change ableism overnight. So you need to dig deep and find worth in your, self-worth. I always smile at people if they stare, because I like to treat people how I like to be treated. And maybe, just maybe, it might trigger something in them to be a better human being and to identify their own enabled privilege.
Yeah, I think it's a really strong message there, Samantha. Like, and also the message or the story that we paint in our own minds is often a very vastly different picture to what the person staring at you might
Yeah,
be.
negative bias.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
all have negativity bias.
yeah.